Hello, my name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Woe. So, romance month slash love month slash whatever I'm calling this whole thing rolls on today, and today we're doing where to start with historical romance. So I've done my where to start if you're a total romance noob, like just some general kind of like if you like this then you might like this with some authors, and then now I'm gonna do I think like 3 videos. I think this is the first one. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry about that, but I'm gonna do 3 videos with sort of like the major kind of areas of romance that are available, which are historical, contemporary, and then like I'm kind of grouping paranormal slash fantasy and sci-fi all sort of together. And there's so many places you could go with this type of list. And what I kind of did was I decided to just go with ones that I really like that I think are beginner friendly. So these are not like necessarily the very, very best romances of all time. Though I think some of these are, but in general, it's just not necessarily what are my favorites of all time either. It's more what are books that I like that I think would be friendly points of entry into this particular subgenre. So again, today we're going to talk about historical romance. So I've got about 10 books I want to recommend. And again, as always, if you are already a romance reader, if you have thoughts about where people should start, you should definitely leave that in the comments below. And hopefully if you already read romance, you'll also be getting some insight into kind of some of the things that I like to read. So without further ado, let's do this. So really the place you have to start for historical romance are the 2 books that I would argue really gave us popular romance as we know it today. The way that Lord of the Rings is the text of popular fantasy as it is today. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen and Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte are the texts of popular romance. Now, some people try to dispute this. There's a lot of reasons why people try to do that. Some are, I think, a little bit misogynistic and elitist, but whatever, let's not even get into that. But I think if you are curious about the kind of origins of the romance genre, I really recommend, I believe it's called A Natural History of Romance by Pamela Regis. I think that's like one of the better histories of the genre, so I'll put that in the description box. But anyway, really the 2 texts that kind of gave us the 2 branches that I was talking about in my my tropes, what did I call it? Know Your Tropes videos, of sort of like the more light tone versus the darker tone, come from Pride and Prejudice and Jane Eyre. Pride and Prejudice being more the romantic comedy, like lighter tone vein, and Jane Eyre being in the more gothic vein. And it's interesting because I basically, if you like romance, you should read these 2 books. Even if you don't end up loving them, they are where the genre came from, and I think it's good to sort of just like be familiar with them, because you'll see people retelling those stories over and over again. But it's interesting because Jane Eyre is my all-time favorite book, period. Even before I got into romance, it was my favorite book. But I don't tend to love like the romance tradition that came out of it, the more gothic and the kind of darker style. I tend to be more in the Pride and Prejudice camp in terms of sort of style that I like, even though I also love Pride and Prejudice, don't get me wrong. But anyway, all that to say, they are historicals at this point. When they were written, they were contemporaries, but they are now historicals. And I just think if we're talking historical romance, that is the place to start. So diving into the historical romances that are being written today, so sort of, a little bit more mainstream or conventional sense of historical romance, I've got about 8 other suggestions for that. So first off is The Duchess War by Courtney Milan. I've talked about Courtney Milan quite a bit on this channel because I just think that she is far and away the best actual stylist and writer in romance today. Just unquestionably, to me, she's the best at that. So I really recommend pretty much anything she's written. She's got a couple of contemporaries that I've not read, but all of her historical romance is fantastic. I really love the Brothers Sinister series, and the first book in that is The Duchess War, which is also my favorite in that series. I do have one left, so I might like that better, but as of now, it's my favorite. So I highly recommend The Duchess War by Courtney Milan. If I was going to give you just one off this list, aside from Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice, to read, that would probably be the one I would recommend. My next suggestion is A Week to be Wicked by Tess Adair. So that is the second in her Spindle Cove series, and I like that whole series, but I really love A Week to be Wicked because it has a nerdy what is she? She's like a paleontologist heroine. Like she is trying to get to Scotland to go to an archaeology exhibit and to like give a talk, I think that's the premise. But anyway, and the hero is like a rake, and so they're sort of opposites, and it's like a road movie type thing, like they're traveling. It's just really great. I have a very soft spot in my heart for that particular one, and it has that kind of lighter tone that I talk about liking. My third suggestion is When Beauty Tamed the Beast by Eloisa James. Now, Eloisa James in real life is a professor of Shakespeare, so she has a certain, I think she's another one who has a very nice writing quality because she's used to writing a lot for her job. So she writes very nicely. She has a whole series, and I forget what it's called, but this book is in it, of fairy tale retellings, and I mentioned a sucker for Beauty and the Beast retellings, and I just think that it's a really great book. One of the things I like about it is that it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and the hero is modeled after House on the TV show House. He is like grumpy, and he has a cane, and like, so that's sort of like another layer of interest, but it's definitely a really well-written book and really just enjoyable. Number 4 is The Highlander Takes a Bride by Lynsay Sands. Now this is much more in the silly category. I think I brought this up in the Romance Tropes I Love video, but it's completely silly. It's got all these like kind of oafish brothers of the heroine running around, and they're a bunch of morons, and the hero, the way I describe Lynsay Sands' heroes and heroines is that the heroes are dumb, pretty, and brave, and the heroines are dumb, pretty, and kind. And like I like it. It's just sort of comfort read. So if you want to dip your toe into like a Scottish romance as well as with the next one, but it's sort of like a very light take on a historical. It's very much a comedy, even though there's also a murder mystery happening in the background. So if any of that sounds appealing to you, I really like that particular one from Lynsay Sands. It's I got a soft spot for it. Number 5 is Never Seduce a Scot by Maya Banks. Maya Banks has a few different Scottish historicals that I think are quite good. This is my favorite of the ones I've read from her so far. What I like about it is that it's almost sort of like a Romeo and Juliet story in the sense of like it's two warring clans, and their marriage is arranged because of like trying to make peace basically by the king. Everyone thinks that the heroine is mentally impaired basically, but she was made deaf from an accident, and she's been hiding it from people because she's afraid essentially that she would be forced into another arranged marriage that she didn't want. And it's about them kind of coming together, and I just really like it. It's more serious than the Lynsay Sands one, but it's not over the top with the angst, and what angst there is I think feels really earned. And I'm also a real sucker for heroes and heroines who are not fully able-bodied, so I thought that was handled pretty nicely in this. Number 6 is a duo of Christmas novellas from Anna Campbell, because as a side note, I've tried reading some Anna Campbell novels and those haven't connected with me as much, but I really do like her Christmas novellas. One is Her Christmas Earl, and one is A Pirate for Christmas. Her Christmas Earl is about essentially a marriage of, like, essentially they get caught together in a compromising situation, so they have to get married. And A Pirate for Christmas is about is essentially like a small town romance, but it's a historical. So I think both of those are very charming. They're very short, so they're easy to get through. I mentioned that in my recommendations for holiday romances, so I'll link that. But I think both of those are really great. And if you like novellas and something that is a little lighter, those are both good places to go to. I wanted to give one recommendation for a heavier historical, and that is Sherry Thomas's His at Night. Sherry Thomas is a great writer. Like, I really enjoy her stuff. Her books do tend to have a lot kind of like heavier tone to them. Like, it's just shit gets a little bit more real in these books, and so that's not always for me, but I did think that this was a really well done book. If I remember correctly, this is there's like a spy trope in there too, which I know a lot of people like. I know I do, and I do think that Sherry Thomas writes some really nice books. So there's that one. And then finally is another one from Tess Adair, and it is a recommendation for another historical novella. I thought I'd sprinkle a few of those in there because I tend to quite like historical novellas. I don't always love full historical novels, and I think that that's just more telling of my taste than anything else. So I had a harder time coming up with ones that I felt were appropriate starting points for people, just because I haven't read as much in that subgenre, because I do find it I find it to be quite a repetitive genre in a lot of ways. But anyway, that being said, let me check what the title is here real quick, because it's a very long title. It is The Scandalous, Dissolute, No Good Mr. Right by Tess Adair. And so anyway, all that to say, I wanted to give you another novella recommendation, and that is Tess Adair writes good novellas in general, but I really have a soft spot for that one. It essentially follows the hero and heroine over the span of a few years as they're falling in love, and as she's kind of understanding why he does what he does more, and it's set kind of in the backdrop of the Napoleonic War. So I just thought that was a nice one, and it also has, while the hero has good prospects, great expectations, if you will, towards coming into some money, he actually does not have money, and that is a central point of the plot, which I always like to see in my historical romances, is a little more diversity in terms of not everybody has a bajillion dollars all the time. So those are my recommendations of where you might start with historical romance. Like I was saying, this isn't the genre that I've read the most of, so if there's other people who have other thoughts about good places to start, certainly welcome to that. You'll also, if you're familiar with romance, you'll notice that I'm very much sticking with like people who are writing today pretty much in my list, because I do quite struggle with older historical romances. I find them often to be it's a lot more in the vein of the Bodice Ripper, and the Bodice Ripper is like 100% not my jam. So if you have some recommendation for some older historical romance that you think is a good place for people to start with, someone like, I don't know, Edith Layton or whoever, I don't know that like Whitney, My Love, or whatever, like those ones, I'm not sure that those are great places for people to start nowadays. But anyway, if you have some recommendations for some older ones that you think are good, I just realized I didn't include any Loretta Chase in here, which is a real shame. I also didn't include any Lorraine Heath, because she's really great too. So just in terms of I'm going over, but in terms of overall author recommendations, I really do like both of those gals a lot. I think that they write really nicely. And one other place that you could start, sorry, I'm just going off script here, but one other place that you could start her writing has not connected for me, but I know that she has been the start for a lot of people in romance, so I want to shout her out. That is Sarah MacLean. I don't love her writing, or I don't love her plots. They're a little too melodramatic for me, but a lot of people really enjoy those, and the series, the Gambling Den series was very popular. I think the first one in that is A Rogue by Any Other Name. So that might be a good place to start. And sorry, I just realized that somehow I left Alyssa Cole off of this list, which was a real oversight on my part, so I don't know how I did that. So let me give a huge shout out to Alyssa Cole. I think that she is writing some really interesting historicals that incorporate non-white characters, and my favorite that she's written is I don't remember the title, I'll have to put it in right here, but it is a novella that is set in James the First's court, and it has a courtier who is black, or she's a Moor, and a knight, and it's their romance. So I definitely recommend that one. I think it's a really, really good book. I'll put the title down here, so I add that in. So anyway, I ended up with some additional bonus recommendations, and I was wrapping this video up before I did that. So anyway, now I'll wrap the video up and say definitely feel free to jump in with more suggestions in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed a little chattier version of a list video here. I think I'm going to do my contemporary and my paranormal ones this way as well. So, a little less edited, a little more just me chatting about a list of books that I put together. So hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that that's going to do it. I hope you guys are having a really, really wonderful day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!